You're listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. For more information, find us on Instagram at Decidedly Podcast.
Did you ever go talk to the counselor when you were in school?
No.
Like the school counselor?
No. Not once.
I don't have any recollection of ever talking to the counselor. I was watching a movie the other day, where they were, the kid goes in and they're talking to the guidance counselor, and I was like, the guidance counselor? I never had a guidance. I mean, maybe there was one.
I think there was.
But I never even saw this person. What an easy job. This person, like, they got paid. I didn't even know they existed. I always thought, if I were a guidance counselor, I'd want to go in as a guidance counselor and just tell kids, like, oh, you're never going to make it.
Because you want to be the inspiration when they win a Grammy. I want to
be the inspiration that when some kid wins an award, they stand up and say, I remember Mr. Smith. He told me
said I wasn't going to be anything, and look at me now. Yeah, exactly. No, that's...
I want to be that guy.
About
that's how I want to be
legacy,
remembered. Yeah, that could be my legacy, that look at all these kids that strived hard because, I was kind of pushing them down and stepping on them when I was their guidance counselor.
I think you might not have ever seen the guidance counselor because you've never seen any counselor ever.
Oh, I feel like I should now, after having talked with Emily, I should really have missed the boat. I'm sure that came out.
Don't worry, I made up for it. I went to enough therapy for both of us.
I remember.
Yeah.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Well, I saw something that Steve Harvey said that, so Steve Harvey was talking about his counsel, guidance counselor that told him, he was never going to be, amount to anything. And, he had told this counselor that he wanted to be on TV. And she said, oh, you're never going to be on TV, And so every year he said, yeah, I send Miss Johnson every year on TV, every year to remind her of that comment. And I thought, right, the first year, that's kind of funny, okay, that's nice. And then the second year, okay, there's another TV. After about 7, 8, 9 years, it's a little passive.
I think he's made his point.
Now you're just being a jerk. You just sit in our big screen TV shows and do something with.
And they're not even worth anything anymore. 20 years ago, that was okay. Well, I'll go sell it
for like $500. Now it's just spending the money to annoy.
Speaking of therapy, our guest today is Emily Sanders. She is a licensed therapist based out of Orange County, California. She's the adjunct professor in the Human Development and Psychology Department at Life Pacific College. She's been practicing for over 13 years, and she knows from personal experience the courage it takes to walk on the road of healing and discovery, works with compassion to support others on their path to restoration, empowerment, and fulfillment. She just, even from speaking with her, has such a strong desire to support the family unit, whether that's through caring for the youngest members of the home or guiding couples to a closer, more satisfying relationship. So we talked about everything from overachieving to a fault, the therapeutic effect of sharing your feelings and experiences, secure, avoidant, and anxious attachment styles, the value or lack of value of unsolicited advice, how that does not get taken, and the cautious selection that we should make when seeking who to take advice from. So I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. I know I learned a lot from talking with Emily. It felt almost like going to therapy. As always, I'm Sanger Smith with my dad, Sean Smith, and this is Decidedly.
So, Emily, where are you calling in from? You in California?
I am, yes. I'm from Orange County, and I practice here in Newport Beach. Yeah.
Now, how long have you been doing psychotherapy?
Good heavens, 13 years now.
How did you decide to get into that? Both of my parents are in that field.
Oh, are they? Interesting.
They kind of got through it, right, a circuitous route. But how did What's your story?
Well, I kind of fell into it. My parents are also in very public service roles, but more in nonprofit vein. And I was really raised to be a wife and a mother, and nobody ever asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. We had no conversations about college. But I did end up making my way and earning my bachelor's in my last year of school. I thought, I think I'd be a good counselor. I had no idea what in the heck I was getting myself into. I applied to one graduate program and I got in. And I remember though that first week or two sitting there in school, and it was like fireworks went off inside. It just is the field for me. So I guess I followed my intuition, and also I feel like I lucked out a little bit. So I love what I do. Yeah.
I feel like that's the story with a lot of therapists. That's Sean's parents' story too. They both kind of just randomly in their 40s decided independently of each other, oh, okay, I guess this seems like a good fit.
Yeah, it was way too late to benefit me personally.
Sorry, Sean.
Up and out. Yeah. It benefited me not at all. Only probably gave them more insight on what they should have done differently.
Yeah, they realized,
probably.
That's why he's so messed up.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, me and my husband, we think, so should we save for college or do we save for therapy?
You know what? I've never had that thought, that question. I'm going to unironically bring that up to clients moving forward. You get two options here. You can save for something.
Yeah.
Right.
Saving for something's probably a good idea, but how confident are you that they're making it with no therapy needed? I didn't.
How does somebody decide that they even want to go talk to a psychotherapist? What is that triggering event that you've seen, or what is the precipitating event that causes people to say, I want to go talk to Emily, or I want to talk to somebody like that?
Sure. And there's a variety of reasons. Obviously, there are some people who just really are curious about themselves and curious about life. And so they come in because they want to learn more about themselves and understand themselves better. But by and large, a lot of people do end up coming to therapy because of a tragedy or a personal crisis or a set of mental health symptoms that are new to them. I know that a lot of your listeners are leaders or business owners and individuals that are very high performing. I find that they tend to come in, and this is an overgeneralization, but towards the tail end of their 30s, their 40s, and a lot of times they are finding that they are anxious when they have never felt anxious before, or they're having panic attacks, or they're facing burnout. And so many of them have been able to truck through and plug on in life and follow a course they've set for themselves, and then all of a sudden feel themselves kind of astounded to be struggling for the first time in their life, in their awareness.
That's interesting. What's typically causing that?
Well, that depends
that
on
change.
the person. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That depends on the person. For a lot of individuals who are very high performing, they are able to streamline their life in a way where they're able to zero in on business and performance and meeting goals. And unfortunately, a lot of the cost has come at the expense of themselves, where they're able to turn down the dial on themselves personally to be able to ignore the feedback that they're getting so that they can keep performing. And on one hand, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. That allows them to achieve. And also, there's a cost to it. And a lot of times the cost bubbles up a little later on in life. And so a lot of people who come to me say, well, I've never felt anxious before. I've never had a panic attack. Am I breaking? And it's the first time that really their symptoms are pushing through to a level that they're not able to ignore for the first time. And actually, when we sit down and do some digging, turns out they have felt anxious before and didn't know that's what it was.
Because they're so able to go right back to this, right back to work, right?
Yep.
And have that fill that hole and push it down.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that it's sort of the cumulative effect of sort of pushing away the social feedback that people are getting? In other words, if I'm focusing on my business, I'm focusing on high achieving, I'm probably getting some cues from my social circles that I'm ignoring because I'm single-mindedly focusing on these things of, that I'm wanting to achieve, goals that I'm wanting to achieve. And do you think it's the compounding effect of these things sort of building up over time and eventually the dam's going to break? Or is it just a maturation process where somebody is becoming now more self-aware, more conscious of how do I create more self-improvement that they may not have been aware of in their 20s and early 30s?
I mean, it could be both, really. A lot of times, oddly enough, you were referencing the social feedback from individuals, and most people, at least in a high-achieving person's life, often their closest friends and family don't realize they're struggling until the dam fully does break, because they are so good at conducting themselves and showing up professionally. They're seen as being the strong person. They are the givers. And so it's not uncommon for people in their closest circle to even be shocked that the individual is struggling.
So I've seen that, professionally as a financial advisor, and I've been doing this about 32 years. One of the things that I have seen is some of that phenomenon where people will come in and there are people who have been financially successful. Those are typically the people that come see me. And yet at the same time, there will be, and primarily it's the husband in the relationship who doesn't want to relinquish control. There's this reluctance to say, I've been successful. I've been doing things well. I don't want somebody else taking over what I've been doing historically, the investing or the fund allocation towards goals or prioritization of those types of things. And do you see that in the same case where somebody is high achieving? They say, hey, what I've been doing is working. Maybe I don't want to come talk to somebody about these struggles, or I don't want to reveal to people that I even have this weakness.
I mean, that's not,
they want to seem invincible.
Yeah. And it's not uncommon. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I hear somebody say, well, I don't do good asking for help, or I can't ask for help. And even the need for me not to see them as too weak or whatnot. So yeah, it's a real act of courage for many, especially high achievers, to come and say, hey, something's not working for me. And to make matters worse, for many individuals who are very high achieving, very high success, in some ways they have learned that their anxiety is also their fuel. So to relinquish anxiety, if they are not anxious, they feel that they will become complacent.
Yes.
They fear becoming complacent.
I have shared that with my friends before, where I was talking with a group of other business owners. Where we get together each month and kind of just talk about our issues, talk about our successes, and in an environment where we know that we're talking with people who relate to us. And I was kind of working through this internal problem one time, saying, I cannot escape this anxiety. Like, the only thing that will make it go away is if I just dive in and take on a new project, work super hard, work long hours, and when I do that, I feel good. I don't feel bad. I don't work till 10 p.m. and go, oh, this stinks. I really hate this. I'm so anxious working till 10 p.m. No, I go, I'm working till 10 p.m. This is super fun. And I said to them,
I'm killing it.
I'm loving this. And one of my friends asked me, and they go, oh, are you scared that if you solve this anxiety that you won't be productive anymore? And I said, yup. That's exactly right.
So you're seeing the anxiety as sort of your fuel. Is that kind of it motivates you because you're? Well,
I think Emily,
you don't want to be not nervous about it.
I know that for me and for a lot of my friends, that is, we're at least aware that that's what motivates us. Like I know that if I have this deep. I'm always thinking I'm not doing enough. So the only way to not think I'm not doing enough is to just do more.
Do more. Yes.
and then I'm done. And then I've done more. And then everyone goes, "Oh, you're great." And I go, "You're lying to me." And I go back and "No, you're not. It's not good enough. It's still not good enough. It never is good enough, but I keep doing it."
Well, Well, I had some of the same issue on, finding fuel for work. Mine was, might have been a bit negative, but I remember growing up that a lot of the social circle that I interacted with, I felt like, and this may not have been true, came from more financial success than I did. And so that became the fuel. I said, I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to be successful. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to achieve. And that became my fuel, this motivation, this competitiveness that may not have been ultimately healthy, but I found that fuel. And I guess, is that normal, Emily, that these types of fuels, you say, well, I don't know that I want to fix this.
Well, there,
kind of like what Sanger was saying.
There's a lot of fear of letting go. I think if we could put that in a nutshell, there's a fear of releasing some anxiety. And on one hand, bits of competition can be healthy. But a lot of times when there's competition involved, there's often a threat of a sense of self. Hey, there's enough room for all of us to be successful. We can all have a lot of money. We can all achieve. We can all perform. And so there is a lot of fear of being beaten or someone doing better, or especially in the corporate world too, it can be kind of savage. And so there's always somebody jockeying for a position so yes, to relax or to be able to find that calm and not work from an anxious place can be really challenging. And again, it is kind of perceived as a threat, because a lot of times when I have clients who say, well, do I keep working myself to the bone, or do I just become complacent? There's no middle ground for them. It's either that they have to work themselves exhaustively to continue to achieve. And if they aren't working themselves to the point of exhaustion, then it must mean that they are becoming complacent or somehow going backwards. And that's the piece that has to be tweaked, that it's not so black and white.
So how do we overcome that? Because that resonates with me a lot. Like I think about, I have that conscious thought once a month at minimum, where I think, okay, well, I could relax. And then this is the long list of everything I'd be giving up. How would I ever how would I ever meet that next goal? I wouldn't have done this thing that I've that I like, I wouldn't have had this positive outcome. And I think about like, oh, what if I just took it easy, work 7-8 hours a day, 40 hours a week? No, I don't want that.
You don't want to be lazy?
Like a loser?
Yeah.
I mean, like
a loser.
And obviously people make it work. And I have friends who are wildly successful and they probably work 20 hours a week. So, they're just different, but you can't see it.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely something to be said about where these goals and ideals were created. I've had many people who sit down and say, okay, I, decided when I was a teenager that I was going to go get my bachelor's, and then I was going to get a graduate degree, and I was going to get married somewhere within there, and I needed to have a child by the time I was 29, and then my dream job is this by 31. And there are a lot of people that plot their course, and they plot their course when they're very young. And they hold to it very rigidly. They keep their head down in life and they just plug through. And all of a sudden they pop up when they've achieved all the things they've wanted. And they think, how did I get here? And why did I get here? Do I even like this life? And so there's something to be said about creating some space to understand, why do I do what I do, and allow ourselves to be curious about that. And there are some things that inevitably we're going to want to keep. And there's going to be some things that we want to readjust and to change. And there's something to be said about, as we are moving through life and aging, do we allow our goals to mature with us? Do we allow our relationships to mature with us? Are we forcing ourselves to wear the same pair of pants that we purchased as a 9th grader? Well, they don't fit so well when we're 40. Yeah. So, even creating space to reevaluate goals and what's important and priorities is so crucial. And also, why? Why were those things so important to us? And what do they say about who we are? And there's something to be said about detaching who we are and our worth from the things that we do and achieve. And it's very challenging to do, especially if our worth is so dependent on our achievements.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Singer probably had that thought imposed on him by his parents.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say that regardless of whether you brought it up. You you saying that, Emily, it reminded me, I was on vacation in Colorado last week. I actually met a woman named Emily. We were at the hot springs, just hanging out in the pool, and started having this conversation with this woman who had just moved out into the middle of Colorado in the mountains, living in a RV on this piece of land that she bought. And I guess I had assumed this is someone who chose this lifestyle, came from a background where that was maybe encouraged, or this was a step up from the background that she lived in. And I was still measuring it in as far as monetary success, maybe oh, well, if you were going to choose that lifestyle, you either grew up poor or you grew up in the van life. Either way, that's the only way you could see that as an option. And turns out she grew up in a very wealthy family, had a very high-paying corporate job in California, and just decided that that's what she wanted to do. And we were talking about that, and she said, yeah, it was actually really a struggle because my parents didn't understand, and that was really hard for me. And I was like, oh, well, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, it wasn't just hard because they didn't understand. I didn't even understand half the time why I was doing it. And she said a phrase that really stuck with me. She goes, when you grow up in a traditional success pipeline, moving out of that can be really challenging. And I thought, I don't know what her parents specifically imposed on her, but I know due to no fault of his own, I imposed upon myself the values and the success that I saw Sean have, and say, oh, well, that is what I have to do. And there used to be things that I would say out loud. There were goals that I would tell other people I had, by this age, I'm going to do this. By this age, I'm going to have this. And the more I thought about it, all those were just looking at whatever Sean had done and then moving it one step above. I have to be.
I'm gonna
I have to be making this amount of money by the time I'm 40. I'm like, why did I pick that number? Oh, it's because that's why I picked that number. So it was totally imposed.
Yeah, there are some kids that are raised in homes where the goals are very explicit and very high. And so children know I have to achieve very big things. There are other homes, though, ironically, where kids can see that there are high-performing parents, or there's a lot of high performers around them, and parents say, oh, well, just do your best. And they think, well, I don't know what that means.
And what do you mean by best?
And so implicitly, if you think this is my best, then to be safe, I'm going to ratchet it up, and I'm going to take it, a foot higher just to make sure that I cover all of my bases. So there are some individuals for whom their very high goals were explicitly given to them. Yeah. And there are others that it is very self-imposed.
And Sean never imposed. You never imposed that on me. He never told me I had to do anything specific. I don't think you really told me you have to do this, otherwise you're life's a waste. I mean, one thing that was funny that is anytime I would consider growing up, there were conversations about what I wanted to do. Right. Oh, well, Singer, what do you want to do? I want to be a poet. Oh, well, good luck making money. That was your favorite line.
Well, it's hard to escape the framework of financial advisors. That's what I do. That's
I don't
the
blame
lens
you.
I'm gonna look through.
I don't blame you. I mean, probably wouldn't have had a great successful career doing that. There's a lot of things that I probably wouldn't. I want to be a baseball player. Okay, good luck making money. You're probably right. It seems like relationships, just as humans, relationships is going to play a big role in a lot of the issues that might cause us to seek therapy, whether it's an existing relationship, I have a problem with my marriage, or I have this problem with myself because of the relationship that I had with my father, or whatever.
Yes.
What do you think is the worst decision that people make within relationships that causes them to have problems?
Well, I think a broken picker is one of them. Unfortunately, it just is the truth, because we can have all these lovely ways that we want to show up in a relationship. But if we are showing up to try and bring love or compassion or partnership to somebody that does not want that, or is not safe, or they don't hold our same values, or they belittle, I mean, there's not a whole lot of work that can be done there. So for some individuals, they're coming in when we're trying to even evaluate, is this the right relationship? Can you be a healthy version of yourself within the context of this relationship? And if so, then how do we change what you bring to the relationship and what you ask for, and boundaries and all that good stuff? By and large, though, I would say that there's quite a split in humans, where there is a set of people that tend to stay in their relationship too long.
Yeah.
And there is a set of people that tend to leave and run from their relationship too soon.
What is there a difference in personality trait that causes that? Or is there a difference in life experience that causes that?
There can be. In general, right now, there's so much talk in pop psychology about attachment. Is that a word that is familiar? Yes. And
I see that. That's like on my algorithm right now. On
yes.
everything.
And as it ought to be, 20, 30 years ago, when we were going to therapist school, attachment was just starting to emerge as something that was extremely crucial, and understanding how does somebody's attachment affect their self-image, their self-worth, and also the way they're able to show up in their relationships. So for individuals who are more anxiously attached, they tend to hold on to a relationship too long. And for those who are avoidant, meaning they struggle with intimacy, they tend to bounce too early. So, and for those who do not understand what attachment is, we're talking about the relationship that is formed with a primary caregiver, and we're looking at attachment being developed and shaped primarily between the first 3 to 5 years of somebody's life. And if mommy, because more often than not it is mother, but if the primary caregiver meets the child's needs consistently, they become securely attached, meaning, hey, I'm worth loving. If I need help, then I know that I can go out into the world and get help. I'm lovable. Hey.
Yeah.
If we have a little one who sometimes the primary caregiver meets the needs and sometimes they don't, there's this anxiety constantly going up and down in the child of there's no consistency. I don't know what to expect. So these anxious individuals get into relationships and they koala bear and they hold on too tight because they don't want to lose a good thing and they're terrified. And then we have people whose primary caregiver really didn't meet any needs, especially emotional needs, right? Because there's a difference between giving a kid a sandwich and a Band-Aid and also helping a kid to comfort themselves and soothe and whatnot. And so more avoidantly attached people say, screw it. Why would I let you in? I've learned I can only count on me, myself, and I. And so those individuals tend to withhold in relationships. And so if something goes slightly askew or they feel smothered, they'll just leave. So,
and that can happen due to no real fault or malice on the part of the primary caregiver, right?
Oh, there are very few parents who make it their mission to make their child's world hell. Most parents are very well-meaning and they're doing the best they can. There are some that are very explicitly cruel and unkind and out to harm their kid, but they have very severe mental health issues. Most parents are very well-meaning. They're giving what they received. So there's a lot of tension there, right? Because so thankful to parents for doing the best they can, and nobody walks away without any little nicks from childhood.
So when it comes to these attachment styles, do people ever bounce back and forth between those two?
Not necessarily. There are some people who we would say are anxious avoidant, and so they have pockets of both within them. But we have one primary attachment style But we can show and exhibit behaviors of other ones. But we have one primary attachment, and that really shows up most heavily in our relationships between us and the parent and us and our partner.
Yeah.
So our attachment gets most heavily transferred from our parent, and then our partner becomes, that attachment figure that gets transferred.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we identify that within ourselves, and say, oh, hey, I'm securely attached. That seems like of the three, you got secure, anxious, avoidant. If I'm anxious or avoidant, I don't want to be that. I don't want that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So secure, great. No work to be done. I'm good. It's all rosy. If you're an anxious attachment style or avoidant attachment style, what decisions can you make to improve that experience for yourself, but also improve it for your partner?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I appreciate that you talked about that in referring to a partner, because we also have the ability to love and soothe in spaces that are hurting. When we enter into a partnership, we have our own mess. Our partner has their own mess, and then we come together to co-create mess. And so one of the biggest gifts that we can give to ourselves and our partner is understanding what is the trash that we are bringing into our relationship, and what kind of trauma does my partner have, and how does that interact with each other. And that's a lot of what couples work is, right? Is understanding how does my partner's experiences and their aches and pains affect them and the way that they're able to show up in the relationship with me. And our relationships can be a source of great healing for one another. It's not our job to heal our spouses or our partners. However, for individuals that are starting to understand what attachment is and that it plays a big role in their life, they can do some reading on different attachment styles. The book Attached is a great one to read. And so they can start to be curious about themselves. They can start to be curious about what needs were met or not met by their parents growing up. That's a great starting point. So one of the main questions that I will always ask anybody that I'm working with towards the start of therapy is, hey, when you needed help or when you were upset, who did you go to? And so it's interesting for me to hear, did somebody even bother going to ask for help? And if they did, who did they go to? And what was that experience like? So that tells me a lot about a person and how they approach relationships now.
And so I'm assuming there's some people that say, I didn't go to anyone.
No one. Yep. A lot of people.
I went to my friends or something. Yeah.
Or I hid in my room, or I created a fantasy world, or I read, or I did sports, or I cried.
What's the most common answer you get?
A lot of people say no one.
Wow.
A lot of people say no one.
Is that real, or is that because we can't remember?
Because
that was my
it
first.
Depends. I think it depends on the person. And so a lot of times I will tell someone, hey, just take a moment to think about it. And it makes most people a little bit uncomfortable to answer. There's a lot of us that we really want to protect our parents and we don't want to put our parents in a bad light. And then for other adults, they're reflecting and saying, hey, I got to be close to my parents by asking my parents what they needed. And so we learn how to create intimacy in all different kinds of ways.
I didn't do that.
Never happened to me.
But I actually think that is a good thing. That is a good thing, because that would be a reversal of roles, right? It would be Sean's job to pay attention to Sanger, not Sanger paying attention to Sean, as a way to be close, right? So we're just paying attention to how we connect. And to other people, does it feel safe to go and ask for help? And a lot of this does, to bring it full circle to the start of our conversation. If we're talking about leaders or business owners, what was their experience like growing up? Did they feel comfortable asking for help? Did they get made fun of for asking for help? Did they get told, well, you should already know that?
I feel like a lot of leaders, especially men, have a really tough time, like Sean was saying, asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I try so hard to be aware of that because I see it as a professional. I see it when I mean, naturally people are coming seeking for something from us
Sure.
as in an advisory role. And if I frame it too much like help, there's certain men, especially, that are gonna, nope, don't need your help. And I get that because I've had that feeling as a man. And it's a human feeling, I guess, to have maybe this identity that I can solve my own problems, or an ego that says that I don't need anyone. What decisions can people make when they're struggling with that to improve?
Mm-hmm. Well, they can reframe it as not going to ask for help, but they can think about it like, hey, I'm going through something tough. It'd be nice to have someone listen to me. I love how you mentioned that you have a group of individuals that you meet with, that you talk business stuff with. You have people that you can relate to. That's really important for other people. For many leaders, do they even have somebody that can relate to them? Do they even have a colleague that they can go and speak with? Do they have a business coach that they can talk with?
Yeah.
Can we even just get somebody talking, even if they feel they are too intimidated or don't need, a therapist or professional help? Can we just get somebody talking? And for some, that's already a big enough challenge.
I have found that most of the successful business owners and leaders that I interact with are in some sort of coaching relationship where they've got somebody they can go to and bounce ideas off of, or somebody they meet with regularly to discuss, growth ideas and things like that. We don't call it therapy, but I bet there's got to be some component.
It feels like therapy.
Probably is.
Coaching is therapeutic.
Yeah.
It's not therapy, but it is therapeutic. Absolutely.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. My loneliest days are about 3 days before my monthly forum meeting. Those are the worst days because it's been the longest.
The longest stretch.
It's been the longest stretch between since I've been able to be heard. And then once I get within 2 days, I'm like, oh, okay, it's right around the corner.
Oh yeah, my group that I'm in decided to take off for the summer.
How dare they?
3 months, and I was like, oh, this is not good. Yeah, 2 of us met and just kind of said, hey, let's get together and go through some stuff, just kind of share. And
I gotta have it. I gotta have it.
Yeah, you really do. If for no other reason, helping to organize your own thoughts. And there's a process, I think, that is, Emily, as you said, is therapeutic, to be able to verbalize, hey, here's what I'm feeling right now. Here's what I'm thinking right now. Here's what I'm going through. And as you say it out loud, a lot of times things resolve themselves. I've found that as I say things, I'm like, oh, that's what I should do. Yeah, I'm answering my own question as I'm vocalizing it.
Yes. And I think for some, if you have any leaders or business owners that are listening to this podcast, I would really encourage them to consider therapy as a space where they can untangle some of their thoughts. Ideally, if you are going for therapy, you are not going to get explicit advice. The therapist ought not be telling you this is what you should do. There may be some very select moments, especially if we're talking about parenting or how to handle a particular marital issue, where more explicit advice would be warranted. But in general, it is a space for you to untangle your own thoughts, organize your thinking, reflect on your experiences, and you have a sounding board to help you create and to contemplate more efficiently and more quickly, really.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I feel a lot of times like what we do as advisors, it's clearly not therapy, but it's in that advisory role, which is really similar to a therapist or a counselor. And I have that experience where people will come and I barely know their name. Like, I don't know nearly enough about them to give them any advice. They go, oh, so what should I do? Well, geez. Like,
I just showed up.
Yeah, you know more than me. I don't know. I don't know anything about you. And I would imagine that happens so much, even more often for you, because there are some things that I certainly can give advice on. Oh, don't buy that. You buy that. Don't save there, save there. And that maybe they would not ever be able to untangle for themselves because they don't know the rules of the game. That's why, we study what we study. But in the therapist role, that has to happen so much, right? Where people come and just say, hey, anyway, so 5 minutes in, Emily, should I get back together with my ex or whatever it is?
Solve my problems. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reality is that a lot of people know what they ought to do. It is understanding, why can't you do that thing? And I'm sure you have to even bump up against that in the financial world, where there are certain decisions that you can say objectively, this makes sense. Financially, this makes explicit sense. You are going to have good gains, but the individual is resistant. And there are some times when you think this is odd. This clearly makes sense on paper, but they are pushing back. There's a lot of emotion in money. And so there are probably moments when you bump up against somebody's emotional stuff that they can't even articulate, that prohibit them from making a good financial decision. The same thing is true when I'm sitting there in therapy. A lot of times people know what they ought to do, but why can't they get themselves to that place? Okay, I know I shouldn't stay with this individual that hits me, but I can't seem to leave. Or I know that I probably should do this, but I can't. And it's understanding that what's going on for you. Yeah. And so sometimes, we need some help untangling.
It seems like
block in there.
That's really important for any true meaningful growth, is to be very mindful of the advice that we're soliciting. I saw this, I think it was a preacher on TikTok. I wish I remembered his name. And he said,
is that what you're watching, your preachers on TikTok?
Yeah, that's what I watch. I watch like a lot of preaching on TikTok. It's not always preaching. A
40-second sermon, Sean's a lot easier to tolerate than 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So you go to church.
I get a lot of theology on TikTok, I'll have you know.
Okay, all right.
Just like all my clients get their mental health advice.
You know where I get mine, Singer? I read the Bible.
God. Oh. Like a good person. Yeah, okay.
Whatever. Go ahead with your little TikTok.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so this guy I met at a coffee shop, is that better? He said something that resonated with me, and it was, unsolicited advice never gets taken. So he says, as a preacher, people will come and say, hey, and he says, I'm not going to say anything until they ask. And I thought, okay, that's good for sure, because people in positions of power, whether it's a therapist, a financial advisor, a preacher, boss, parent, it's really easy to maintain that position of power and that dynamic in all interactions within that relationship. And when people come talk, go, oh, boom, here's advice. I'm a problem solver. We have this power dynamic here. You should totally do this. And people ain't never going to do it. Beyond that, beyond not giving unsolicited advice, sometimes people they solicit advice when they shouldn't. What can those people do? Is there anything that we can do, any decisions that we can make to be more mindful about the advice that we get?
Mm-hmm. There's something to be said about having wise people in our life that really know us, that can act as a buffer of sorts, right? That can speak into our life and give us sound feedback. And also being able to trust ourselves that first and foremost, that we run it through our own personal filter. And there are many people that do not trust themselves enough and are highly dependent on advice. And it's something to be said if individuals find that they're basically taking a poll whenever they have a decision to make, that they'll ask the postman what they should do, their barista what they should do, their pastor what they should do, their neighbors what they should do.
Their Instagram followers. Yeah.
Yes. that ought to serve as a check that somebody's self-esteem or their self-confidence obviously is not what it needs to be able to move efficiently. And so we are always walking and holding this tension of being able to, or ideally being able to, trust our gut and our intuition and make authentic choices, with also still being teachable. And there's a balance, because there are many people that will speak from their own place of wounding or will give foul advice.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to temper that. And there's a lot of people, especially if they have a skin in the game, in what you choose, that it's not free.
Yeah, it seems to me like you really need to be mindful. Does this person either shares my values or knows my values? Because so many times, particularly I think advice with friends is, I ask a friend for advice and they give it to me with their own set of values that are guiding that advice, and probably not even understanding my own values. And a lot of people, they're seeking advice and they don't even know their own values. They don't even know what's important to them. And we're going to take advice from someone who, they can't possibly know what our own values are if we don't know our own.
So for going to therapy, ideally your therapist, it should not matter if they share your same values or not. They need to be able to put their own experiences and their own values aside and be able to, in a sense, hop into your world and see your life through your eyes.
Yeah.
And so if somebody decides they're going to try out therapy or sit with a therapist and it feels like the therapist is judging them or is being too explicit about what they ought to do, or they find themselves feeling self-conscious with the therapist, that's not a good sign. So yes, the therapist should be working through your own worldview.
Speaking of therapists, Emily, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, they're welcome to follow me on Instagram if they would like to. I'm Emily Sanders Therapy, emily.sanders.therapy on Instagram. They can find me on my website, emilyhsanders.com. I'm on Facebook, just out here living my best life.
Yeah, and we will put a link to that in the show notes, and I can attest that.
Definitely follow Emily on Instagram. You have amazing content on Instagram.
Thanks. It matters to me. It scratches my teaching itch, and not everybody can afford therapy. So I hope someone can find something helpful there.
Good. Thank you so much for being with us, Emily. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
My takeaway from her discussion, she said something that really stuck out to me. And that was, many times that we know what we need to do, and the part of therapy is figuring out why we're not doing that. And I thought that was really profound, and I've seen that in my own financial planning practice. This person knows they should be saving for retirement. The question is, why are they not doing that? I mean, they have a calculator, right? They know they should. Why are they not?
Yeah.
And I think that becomes the real question to uncover, just in my own work that I do. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. My takeaway was, one decision that we can make to improve our lives and really grow within ourselves is to make the bold decision to speak about our issues, right? She said that the biggest step in healing is to make a decision to go talk with someone. It doesn't have to be a licensed therapist, although that would be a fantastic place to go. But speaking about it at all is better than holding it within, bottling it up, having it shoot out sideways decades down the road. You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support. It helps others find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more daily decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Decidedly Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly.
Insights, advice, and comments provided by Sean Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.